Hello, some more art comparisons for you. So in this video I'm going to be comparing Modernist abstraction with cave art, and this idea of like the invention and discovery of abstraction through modernism, and then like the idea of where else has it come from. I think I'll do some other videos about like people, like particularly women, who predate the kind of masculine modernist abstraction. That's kind of the standard narrative of like the discovery or invention of abstract art. But then this is like even more ridiculously far back. This is like tens of thousands of years. So I'm going to talk through some comparisons and then like just kind of talk about why they might be similar and why this has happened. So this is Vasily Kandinsky, very famous modernist abstract artist. 1935 this was made, and then yeah, this is some geometrical patterns from the El Castillo cave in Spain, so Paleolithic rock art. And yeah, I mean, like maybe it's not the easiest to see with this image. This one's a bit better because it's flattened it out onto like a flat surface rather than like that kind of undulating rock. Which kind of disguises the marks a little bit. But yeah, these kind of like proto-base forms of these kind of wibbly-wobbly rectangles and rectangles within rectangles, and then dots and the kind of groupings and the kind of playful composition. And like Vasily Kandinsky, he didn't start making work like this. He started making work like all these artists of that era. They started like realistically, that was the training, and then progressively through like, collectively, individually, they kind of went through like impressionism, post-impressionism, like fauvism, cubism, and like was deconstructing like realism because of photography and not needing to do that, not needing to be just for realistic representation, and then they end up with this kind of stuff. This is kind of like their kind of peak of their career. Vasily Kandinsky attains a little bit from this, but kind of peak work ends up with these kind of like very kind of childlike forms. Another very famous artist, this is Kazimir Malevich, Russian suprematism, very much part of that movement, and his kind of like peak pieces kind of like this vibe. And then again, this is that same cave, El Castillo, a different area of it, and yeah, I mean, slightly more curved, but this idea of like rectangles, lines, and then like abstract composition. This is Natalie Goncharova, Rayonism, 1917, and then this is from this is San rock art, so this is South African. Completely abstract again, still like and just mark making, lines crisscrossing, but yeah, similar patterns. Pierre Mondrian, he's the one who did like the like rectangles, red, yellow, black lines, you know. Anyway, this is like a self-portrait. And then this is in Spain again, Cave of Los Caseres, Spain. And again, I've got a drawing of it so you can see it a bit more clearly. But yeah, you have like the faces, the kind of like the alien faces. I think there's something about like them seeing these faces come out of the rock. And then yeah, just mark making. So we've got this kind of contrast between abstract mark making and then it's all turning into figuration. And I think this is a really nice comparison because you really can't tell which is which, but this is more rock art from that same place. Cave of Los Casares, apologies for my pronunciation. And this is André Breton. This is from André Masson, 1921, and this is an automatic drawing, and this is part of surrealism, the surrealist movement. So, you know, lots of scribbly mark making, and then where he sort of worked into some bits to then pull out figuration. So the same here, we've got lots of abstract mark making, and then the marks kind of coalesce to then get figures. And then my last comparison, which is Joan Miró. This was made in 1953, and this is Altamira Cave, Spain. So yeah, like all the Paleolithic stuff is like 10 to 40,000 years. I think the earliest might be, you know, several thousand years ago, but yeah, very, very old. Paleolithic, this one. And then Joan Miró, and yeah, like these kind of curvy squares, rectangles within rectangles, like organic shapes, and then lines, But yeah, kind of like very playful, very childlike. And I wonder whether like, because there's that phrase, there's that quote from like Pablo Picasso where he went to visit, it's a famous cave in like Chevreau, something like that. He went to a cave, Pablo Picasso, and he like, there's a quote with him saying like, "We've learned nothing," and I think there's something interesting about like an access to like a primordial creativity that people back in cave times did not have like much like ego or barrier to them just going and playing and mark making, whereas like the artists of like Western modernist abstraction, they started off with the weight of like realism training and the pressures of art markets and stuff, patrons, and then there was this great liberation throughout modernism of being able to paint the unseen and the discovery of abstract art. So yeah, I think it's interesting that they've ended up at the same kind of base patterns. And I think I'll do another video about this idea of entoptic phenomena, of like what are those base patterns. So this is from, I heard about it from a book, Graham Hancock's book Supernatural, but he was referencing another book, David Lewis Williams' The Mind in the Cave, and it was comparing rock art from like different continents that obviously had no contact with each other but had similar mark making, similar kind of proto base, kind of like a key, base forms. But I like to see it as like like what's the basic marks you can make. You can make dots, you can make lines. Those lines can interact parallel or wave, and then they kind of compound together to make form. They can crisscross to make grids, and they can meander. So I think I'm gonna do another talk about that. But it's this idea of like, because entoptic phenomena, it's about entoptic, like in your eye. So it's to do with like biology and maybe the subconscious. But like this idea of the discovery through modernist abstraction, and then also in cave art, this kind of base biology of like image making, mark making, like what are the base marks of creativity and art.